the spring of 2022, during Memorial Day weekend, my family booked a modest cottage through VRBO near Shenandoah National Park. It wasn't anything luxurious. Just 2 small bedrooms, a cramped kitchenette, and a creaky deck with loose railings that rattled whenever the wind picked up. The description promised peaceful spring retreat with hiking access nearby. The map displayed a pond, a trailhead marker, and a service road cutting through the dense woodland. The owner, a woman named Patricia, sent my mom a lockbox combination along with detailed instructions. Store all food in the bear-proof container, lock your vehicles at night, respect the 10 p.m. noise ordinance, and never leave campfires burning unattended. At the very bottom of her message was a line that caught my attention. Morning mist can become dangerously thick. Always stay on designated trails. I was 17 and itching to do something other than sit around. We'd arrived at the cottage well after dark and spent the evening unpacking and bickering over who got which bed. My younger brother claimed the one near the window. My mom arranged a plastic pumpkin full of leftover Easter candy near the entrance, even though we hadn't seen a single house on the drive-in. I drifted off to the sound of wind rustling through pine needles and the old heating unit clicking on and off. Just before dawn, I woke up ahead of everyone else. The cottage felt damp and hushed. My phone displayed 6:28 a.m. with barely any signal. The weather app showed a mist warning. I threw on a hoodie, trail runners, and a windbreaker I usually wore during cross-country practice. I filled a metal water bottle, grabbed a granola bar, and scribbled a quick note on the counter. Taking a morning hike to the pond. Back by 7:30. I eased the doors shut carefully to avoid waking anyone. The deck board still groaned beneath my weight. The parking area was packed gravel and mud. The trees towered overhead, dripping with condensation. Mist clung to everything like wet cotton, the kind that made your own breathing sound amplified. When I exhaled, vapor hung in front of my face. I headed toward the trailhead marker I'd spotted the previous evening, a weathered wooden post covered in faded park stickers and a laminated map with a cracked protective sleeve. The primary loop was marked in red on the map. A narrow path branched toward the pond. Another line indicated the service road. Everything appeared straightforward and manageable. The woods were eerily silent except for moisture dripping from branches. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a single crow call. The mist amplified every sound close to me. My footsteps, my breathing, the crinkle of the granola bar wrapper in my pocket, while muffling everything further away into nothingness. I snapped a photo of the map and pocketed a small pine cone to use as a scale reference. I know it sounds silly, but it made me feel more prepared. I started down the red-blazed trail. Red paint markers appeared on tree trunks at irregular intervals. The ground was a thick carpet of damp pine needles. 10 minutes in, I crossed a narrow wooden footbridge spanning a creek. The water gurgled steadily beneath. Visibility was maybe 20 yards. Beyond that, just gray nothingness. I walked more cautiously than usual. The mist transformed the trail into a claustrophobic tunnel. At the first fork, a hand-carved wooden sign pointed toward Pond 0.4 Mekraum. I took it. About 100 paces later, I passed a rusted "No overnight camping" sign. Someone had carved letters into the metal. The trail narrowed considerably. The mud beneath my shoes made a soft sucking sound with each step. Then I heard something else. A branch snapping. One sharp crack not too far away. I froze. I told myself it was probably a deer. I'd encountered deer countless times. Deer break branches and bound away. I stood listening. The mist seemed to press against my eardrums. Another sound came, heavier, like a boot grinding into wet undergrowth. Then silence. took a few more steps, keeping my eyes on the red trail markers. I didn't want to stand there and overthink it. But I also couldn't shake the sensation of being observed. I moved my phone to my front pocket and kept my hand wrapped around it. I didn't have pepper spray. I didn't have anything else. A minute later, I heard it again. Not a snap this time. 2 deliberate steps, then nothing. I still couldn't see anyone. The mist made the path feel like walking through suspended smoke. I glanced behind me. My shoe prints were dark impressions pressed into the wet needles, standing out against the lighter surface. I thought I detected movement, a darker form shifting between tree trunks. I convinced myself it was a branch swaying in a breeze I couldn't feel. I continued toward the pond. Another red marker appeared. The trail curved gradually to the left. I'd read that sound travels strangely in fog, and I found myself calculating how far my voice would carry if I needed to scream for my dad. I didn't scream. I didn't want to seem paranoid. I figured I'd reach the water's edge, snap a quick photo like any normal person on a morning walk, then head back for breakfast. Then I heard breathing, not my own. It was a soft exhalation with a faint rasp at the end, like someone with a chest cold. It came from behind me and to my left. I spun around. A figure stood between 2 pine trees. The shape was close enough that I could distinguish a dark jacket and the outline of shoulders. The person didn't call out, didn't wave, didn't step aside. I said, "Hello?" Because adults always tell you to speak up to show you're not frightened. My voice sounded muffled and small in the mist. The person didn't respond. I didn't want to run. Running makes others chase. But my legs felt coiled and ready to move before my brain fully processed the situation. I took 2 steps backward, then turned and started walking quickly. The quiet behind me shattered. Footsteps crunched through undergrowth in a rapid rhythm. The person was following me. I picked up my pace. My feet slipped on the wet needles. A low branch scraped my shoulder. I looked for the next red marker and saw nothing. The path had split into 2 faint tracks and then disappeared completely. I'd veered off the correct trail without realizing it. I chose a direction that angled downward, reasoning that the pond must be at a lower elevation. Branches whipped against my windbreaker. The sound of the other person grew louder. Closer footfalls, heavier breathing. I started running. Not a controlled, measured run. A desperate, stumbling sprint where every step risked a twisted ankle. My breath came in ragged gasps. My chest burned. I could hear the person's shoes sliding and digging into the earth behind me. I hit a slick patch of mud and went down hard on my left side. Pain exploded through my hip and elbow. I grabbed a thin tree trunk and hauled myself upright, limping forward. A spider web stretched across my face and stuck to my lips. I clawed it away and kept moving. I heard the person stumble behind me and curse under their breath, quick and guttural, not a shout, just a single harsh word. I couldn't see the pond, couldn't see the red markers. Only trees, only mist. Only my own vapor breath when I jerked my head around too quickly. I heard the person behind me again, and then I heard nothing. They'd stopped. I stopped too. Stopping made every sound amplify. My heart hammered against my ribs like a fist pounding a door. I listened hard. The forest offered tiny sounds in return. A water droplet sliding off a leaf. Something small ticking against bark as it fell. The slow whisper of wind through branches somewhere above the mist layer. I took 2 careful steps and nearly tumbled into a shallow ravine filled with decomposing leaves and a rotted log. I slid down into it and crouched low, pressing my spine against the muddy wall. The log was partially hollow. I wedged myself beneath its overhang, so I was concealed by bark and damp vegetation. The wood smelled like earth and fungus. Pieces flaked off and clung to my jacket. I tried to control my breathing. I switched my phone to airplane mode to prevent any notification sounds. The screen showed SOS only for signal. Footsteps approached again, slow this time. They passed to my left, then circled back to my right. The person wasn't crashing through the woods anymore. They were being methodical. In the mist, careful footsteps sound even more patient, like someone testing each step before committing their full weight. I heard a light tap, like a stick striking stone. Then a pause. Then that same breathing, soft exhalation with a faint rasp. I stayed beneath the log and fought the urge to cough. My throat felt like sandpaper. My hip throbbed. I considered calling 911, but my phone showed no real signal, and speaking would reveal my position. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, moving with excruciating slowness. Minutes crawled by. I didn't know how many. Each time I thought it was safe, I counted to 60. Then to 60 again. I heard nothing. Then I heard the steps again, farther away. Then silence. Then a sound behind me. I realized the ravine made small noises when water dripped into it from the leaves above. I forced my shoulders to relax so they wouldn't shake visibly. I told myself to wait. I told myself my parents would wake up, see my note, and call me. A strange part of me wanted to hear my mom yelling when I finally answered. Normal anger would mean this nightmare was over. I must have waited 25 minutes. It felt like 3 hours. My legs went numb. My fingers tingled. Then I heard a voice, faint at first. It said my name, not as a question, but as a statement. It sounded like the way I'd call my brother in a store when I couldn't find him. But the voice was wrong. It had the wrong cadence. Too smooth, like a recording played through a cheap speaker. It came from my left, then from slightly farther left, then closer. It said my name again, then made that soft, rasping exhale. I pressed my tongue against the roof of my mouth and didn't answer. I heard leaves rustle. The voice stopped. The footsteps came again, 2 or 3, and then a stick tapped against a tree trunk. A casual little knock. The next thing I heard was different. It came from far behind the first voice. Upslope, above the mist, like it was dropping down from clearer air. It was my dad. He called my name the way he does when he's looking for his wallet and needs me to answer immediately. His voice cut through the mist like a knife. He yelled, "Answer me right now." The footsteps near me paused. I could feel that pause in the way the entire forest seemed to hold its breath. Then the steps moved away rapidly, downhill, then cutting to the right. Branches snapped. Whoever it was abandoned all pretense of stealth. They were done with me. My dad called again, louder. My name echoed between trees. I crawled out from beneath the log, mud coating my back and matted in my hair, and I shouted, "Here!" My voice cracked. I felt ridiculous and alive at the same time. "Keep yelling," he shouted back. "I'm following your voice." "I'm here. I'm in a ravine." I waved my arms, even though he couldn't possibly see me. I listened for the other person, but heard only my dad's shoes pounding through undergrowth and his heavy, urgent breathing. It took another minute for him to reach me. When he did, his face was flushed red, and his clothes were streaked with mist. He wore his old running shoes, and my windbreaker was smeared with dirt where he must have grabbed something to keep his balance. He looked at my hip, then at my face. He didn't exactly hug me. He put one hand on the back of my neck and squeezed hard enough that it almost hurt. He asked what happened. I told him someone had followed me, then chased me. My dad didn't ask if I was certain. He didn't suggest I'd imagined it. He scanned the surroundings carefully and positioned himself between me and the direction the footsteps had gone. He said, "Let's get out of here." We walked slowly, staying close. He asked which direction I'd come from. I said I thought the pond was downhill, so the cottage must be uphill. He nodded and pulled out a small compass clipped to his keychain, the cheap kind you get from a gas station. He's the type of dad who clips useful things to his keychain. The needle trembled and settled on a direction. He chose it and said, "We'll hit either a trail or the service road." On the way up, we found one of the red markers. I nearly cried when I saw it. The paint was chipped and ugly, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. We followed the markers until the footbridge appeared through the mist. I recognized a broken railing post and a rock with a pale streak across it. I knew we were close. We reached the trailhead marker. The weathered post looked ordinary and damp. It felt like a doorway back into a safer reality. Back at the cottage, my mom stood on the deck in her bathrobe and slippers, phone clutched in her hand. Her face was white and tight with barely controlled fear-anger. She grabbed me, then stepped back to examine my hip and elbow. My brother asked if I'd seen a bear. I didn't answer him. My dad said, "We're calling the police." He said it matter-of-factly, like announcing he was going to check the oil in the car. The dispatcher asked for our location. We gave the cottage's road name, a nearby mile marker, and the name of the national park. 2 rangers arrived about 35 minutes later. Their SUV headlights sliced through the mist in brilliant beams. They took my statement on the deck. I tried to be precise. I told them I first heard footsteps after the rusted camping sign. I described the ravine and the hollow log. I described the breathing with the rasp. I described the word I heard muttered under the person's breath. I didn't repeat it to my mom. One ranger, a man with a gray beard and coffee stains on his uniform shirt, asked if the person could have been a hunter. "It's turkey season," he said. "People wear camouflage. The mist plays tricks." I told him I'd heard the person say my name in a normal speaking voice, and it didn't sound like my father. I told him the person had tapped trees with a stick, like they were testing for something or trying to make me respond. The ranger didn't say I was mistaken. He wrote everything down. He said they'd sweep the trail and check the service road. He told my dad he'd done the right thing by calling and by shouting for me. "Mist traps sound weirdly," he said. "Sometimes loud is best." The VRBO host, Patricia, texted while the rangers were still there. She apologized and mentioned there had been reports of suspicious individuals parking at the trailhead before sunrise. She said she'd drive by later to check. She told us to keep our doors locked and to contact her if we needed anything. The rangers went to the trailhead. The mist thickened again as morning progressed. My mom made hot chocolate, but I couldn't drink it. My hip swelled into a dark, purple bruise the size of a baseball, where it had struck the ground. Around lunchtime, the rangers returned and reported they hadn't found anyone. They had, however, found fresh boot prints near the ravine, larger than mine, and marks where someone had pushed off from a log. The prints headed downhill and then followed the service road until the ground became too hard to show impressions. They asked if I wanted to file a formal report. I said yes. They asked if I'd recognize the voice if I heard it again. I said maybe, but I wasn't confident. They told us to be cautious on trails. They weren't dramatic. They didn't make promises. They said they'd increase patrols in that area for the next week. We stayed at the cottage that night because my mom didn't want to abandon the entire trip. We remained inside and watched a movie with the volume turned low. Even so, every time a character breathed heavily, I thought of that soft rasp at the end of the person's exhalations. I could still smell the damp wood of the hollow log. I could feel the mud on my back, the grit under my fingernails. I went to bed late and didn't sleep for hours. Every gust of wind made me picture someone standing behind the trees, waiting for mist thick enough to hide them again. The air had that perfect late October bite. Cool enough for a jacket in the morning, warm enough by midday that you didn't feel winter closing in just yet. For weeks, my friends Derek, Marcus, and I had been planning the ultimate fall escape. The concept was simple. Rent a cabin in the middle of nowhere for Halloween weekend, unplug from our jobs, build a bonfire, and soak in the peak autumn foliage. We spent several evenings scrolling through Airbnb, searching for the ideal spot. We wanted isolation, a genuine deep woods experience. We finally settled on a place called Cedar Ridge Retreat. The photos looked incredible. A traditional log structure surrounded by endless forest, featuring a stone hearth and a broad wraparound porch. The listing promised tranquility and seclusion. It was exactly what we were after. We booked it immediately, splitting the cost 3 ways. As the weekend approached, my anticipation built. I packed a cooler with food and beer, my warmest flannel shirts, a couple of thriller novels, and my camping gear. I was ready to completely disconnect. Then the texts started arriving on Friday morning, the day we were supposed to depart. The first came from Derek. "Man, I'm really sorry. Work emergency. My manager is making me cover a shift tomorrow. I can't get out of it." Classic Derek excuse, weak and last minute. I was irritated, but figured Marcus and I would still have a solid time. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. Marcus: "Hey dude, really sorry, but Sarah came down with something nasty and I don't think I should leave her alone this weekend. Can we reschedule?" Another flimsy excuse. I knew for a fact Sarah had posted Instagram stories from a bar with friends less than 15 minutes earlier. I was livid. Not just because they'd bailed, but because of how transparent and lazy their excuses were. For a moment, I considered canceling everything. I might be able to get a partial refund, and the thought of going alone suddenly felt depressing. But then I looked at my packed bags, the full cooler by the door. I'd been anticipating this for a month. I wasn't going to let their flakiness destroy my weekend. Fine, I thought. I'll go by myself. Maybe the solitude will be even better. The drive took about 3 hours, carrying me from familiar suburbs onto winding back roads I'd never traveled. The farther I drove, the more houses disappeared, replaced by endless expanses of trees painted in brilliant reds, oranges, and golds. My cell service died about 40 minutes before I reached the cabin, exactly as the GPS had warned. The final turn was onto a long dirt road that crunched beneath my truck's tires. The cabin looked exactly like the photos, set back from the road, nestled in a small clearing. It was perfect. I was completely and utterly alone. I spent the first day unpacking, exploring the surrounding woods, and collecting firewood. That night, I built a crackling fire in the outdoor pit and stared up at the stars. Without any light pollution, the sky was an extraordinary canvas of glittering points. "Their loss," I muttered to myself, feeling a sense of vindicated satisfaction. The first night was flawlessly peaceful. I slept deeply with only the gentle sound of wind through the trees. The second night, Halloween night, was different. I went to bed around midnight after watching a horror film on my laptop. The wind had picked up significantly, and I could hear branches scraping against the cabin's roof. It was slightly unsettling, but I attributed it to being in an unfamiliar environment. I drifted off feeling content. The scream jolted me awake. It wasn't from my movie, and it wasn't an animal. It was a woman's scream, raw and filled with absolute terror. My eyes snapped open in the pitch-black room. My heart slammed against my ribs. I lay there frozen, listening. Had I been dreaming? The wind howled outside, and for a moment I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Then I heard it again. Closer this time. Help! Someone please help me! I threw off the blankets and crept out of bed. My mind raced. Who could possibly be out here? According to the listing, the nearest neighbor was miles away. I tiptoed to the living room window and peered through a gap in the curtains. I couldn't see anything except darkness and the silhouettes of trees swaying violently in the wind. And then, a sound that made every muscle in my body tense. Pounding, frantic, desperate pounding on the cabin's heavy wooden door. Please, let me in. He's going to catch me. The woman's voice shrieked from the other side. My first instinct was to do nothing, to hide. This is exactly how horror movies start, right? You never open the door in the middle of the night for a stranger in the woods. But the pounding continued, growing more frantic, more desperate. She sounded genuinely terrified. What if someone really was chasing her? What if she was seriously injured? Could I live with myself if I did nothing and later discovered something terrible had happened to her right outside my door? My conscience won. I took a deep breath, walked to the door, and fumbled with the deadbolt. "I'm opening the door," I called out, my voice shaking slightly. "Just step back." I pulled the heavy door open, and a woman practically fell inside, collapsing onto the floor. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with long dark hair tangled with leaves and dirt. Her clothes were ripped, and she was sobbing hysterically. She scrambled away from the open doorway and pressed herself into the corner of the room, staring at the entrance with wide, terrified eyes. "Thank you. Thank you," she gasped, clutching her arms. "He was chasing me through the woods. My car died on the road." "It's okay. You're safe now," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. I closed the door and locked the deadbolt. The sound of it clicking into place echoed through the small cabin. I was about to ask her what happened when a new sound began. Slow, heavy footsteps on the wooden porch. Then a different kind of pounding. Not the frantic, light banging of the woman. This was heavy, powerful, and deliberate. Each impact seemed to shake the entire structure. A man's voice, deep and furious, roared from outside. "Open this door! Give me back my wife!" I stood frozen, my eyes darting between the shaking door and the terrified woman huddled in the corner. She shook her head violently. "Don't. Please don't," she whispered. "She's with me." I shouted at the door, trying to make my voice sound authoritative. "You need to leave, or I'm calling the police." "She's my wife. You have no right," he bellowed. And the pounding intensified. The wood groaned under the force. I grabbed my phone from my pocket, my hands trembling so badly I could barely grip it. No service, of course. "I'm warning you. I'm calling the cops right now," I bluffed, holding the useless phone to my ear as if I were on a call. I was standing near the door, my back to the woman, my entire focus on the violent assault threatening to break through, expecting the frame to splinter at any second. The man outside let out a furious roar and threw his full weight against it. The entire structure shuddered. In that split second, as my attention was completely absorbed by the door, I felt a sudden, blinding explosion of pain at the back of my skull. It wasn't a punch. It was sharp, metallic, and incredibly heavy. The room tilted sideways. My vision filled with white spots, and a high-pitched ringing screamed in my ears. My knees gave out. And the last thing I remember before the world went black was the hard, cold sensation of the wooden floor slamming into my face. When I came to, the first thing I registered was the cold. A frigid draft was blowing through the cabin. My head felt like it had been split open with an axe. A sticky, warm substance was matted in my hair. I pushed myself up slowly, my vision swimming. The living room was a complete disaster. Cushions were torn from the couch, drawers were yanked out and emptied. My bags were ripped open, their contents scattered across the floor. The door was wide open. They were gone. Panic set in. I stumbled through the wreckage, checking for my belongings. My wallet, gone from the kitchen counter. My laptop, missing from the table. My phone, nowhere to be found. My stomach dropped when I thought of my truck keys. They'd been hanging on the hook beside the door. Gone. With growing dread, I ran out onto the porch and looked at the spot where I'd parked. Empty. Nothing but tire tracks in the dirt. They hadn't just robbed me. They'd stranded me. I was miles from anywhere, with no vehicle, no phone, and a bleeding head wound. I collapsed onto the porch steps, the cold night air doing nothing to stop the waves of terror and despair washing over me. I spent the rest of the night huddled in the destroyed cabin, a chair wedged under the broken doorknob, jumping at every creak and every gust of wind. Sleep was impossible. And the first gray light of dawn filtered through the trees. I decided I had to move. I couldn't just wait there. I remembered that during my drive in, after I'd lost cell service but before I reached the cabin's dirt road, I thought I'd seen smoke from a chimney in the distance. It was a long shot, but it was my only hope. I started walking, following the dirt road back the way I'd come. My head throbbed with every step. The beautiful autumn forest that had seemed so peaceful 2 days ago now felt menacing, like it was concealing countless threats. Every shadow looked like a person. Every rustle of leaves sounded like approaching footsteps. After what felt like forever, maybe 45 minutes of walking, I saw it. Through a break in the trees, another smaller cabin, with a thin trail of smoke rising from its chimney. Hope surged through me. I half ran, half stumbled toward it. As I got closer, I saw an elderly man sitting on the porch in a rocking chair, drinking from a mug. He looked up as I emerged from the trees, his eyes widening at the sight of me. Filthy, disheveled, with dried blood caked in my hair. I poured the whole story out, my words tumbling over each other in a frantic rush. He listened patiently, his expression grim. He didn't seem surprised, just sad. He brought me inside, gave me a glass of water and a towel for my head, and let me use his landline to call the police. The state troopers arrived about an hour later. I told them everything, every detail I could remember. They took my statement, drove me back to the ransacked cabin to examine the scene, and then, with nowhere else for me to go, they gave me a ride all the way home. They were never caught. The police told me it was a common scam in remote areas, a professional team. The woman plays the victim to get you to open your door and let your guard down. The man provides the intimidation and muscle. They target solo travelers in isolated rentals, take everything of value, and disappear before sunrise. I never got my truck back, or my laptop, or my wallet. But what they really stole was something else. They stole that sense of safety, the belief that a person in distress deserves your help. Now, Whenever I hear a strange noise at night or see someone stranded on the roadside, I hesitate. I feel that flicker of fear and suspicion. And I remember that terrible night in the woods. I remember the woman's desperate screams and the simple, terrifying fact that the monster isn't always the one outside the door. Sometimes you're the one who lets it in. A few years ago, my wife Elena and I decided a secluded mountain lodge would be the perfect way to celebrate our 6th anniversary. We both have demanding careers in the city, and the prospect of being somewhere with nothing but evergreens, a wood-burning stove, and each other sounded like paradise. We found a place online that looked ideal, a small, rustic lodge on an expansive property, miles from the nearest town. The reviews were overwhelmingly positive, with everyone praising the attentive host, a man named Gregory. The drive up was stunning at first, with spring wildflowers blooming along the roadside. But as we climbed higher into the mountains, a thick, wet fog rolled in. It was the kind of fog that absorbs sound and light, shrinking the world to just the gravel road illuminated by our headlights. By the time we pulled up to the lodge, you couldn't see more than 15 feet in any direction. It felt like we'd been completely severed from civilization, which was supposed to be the appeal. But it was more unnerving than I'd anticipated. The lodge itself was charming, though, exactly as advertised, with a large stone fireplace and comfortable furnishings. On the kitchen island sat a welcome basket filled with local preserves, artisan crackers, and a bottle of wine. Tucked into the basket was a handwritten note on cream-colored cardstock. "Welcome, Elena and Marcus," it began. Elena read it over my shoulder. "That's a nice touch," she said, already working the corkscrew into the wine. I continued reading. "I hope you have a wonderful and relaxing stay. I've already configured the Wi-Fi for you. The password is posted on the refrigerator. Please make yourselves completely at home." It all seemed perfectly normal and hospitable. But the next part made my stomach twist. "I hope you enjoy the fireplace. I restocked the pine wood. It burns cleaner and hotter. And Marcus, I noticed from your profile picture that you're a photography enthusiast. So I left some wildflowers on the mantel that I thought you might enjoy capturing." I looked up at the mantel. Sure enough, an arrangement of vibrant purple and yellow wildflowers was displayed artfully across the stone. It was such a small gesture, but it felt deeply wrong. "Elena," I said quietly. "How would he know my name? You booked everything under your account?" Elena paused, looking at the note. "Your name's probably listed somewhere on the profile. You know, like Elena's husband, Marcus, or something." "No, it's not," I insisted, my mind racing. "And the picture?" He studied my profile photo closely enough to notice I like photography. The picture was one I'd taken last spring at a botanical garden surrounded by flowers. But it was just a tiny icon on a booking website. The idea of this stranger, Gregory, zooming in on it, analyzing it, felt like a violation. It felt like he'd been watching me. "Hey, don't stress about it," Elena said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "He's probably just an old-school host trying to be personal. It's a little unusual, but he's just trying to get 5-star reviews." I tried to let it go. Elena was right. It was probably nothing. We unpacked, started a fire with the pine logs Gregory had left, and tried to settle in. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Every time I looked at the windows, I saw only our own reflection against the black, fog-shrouded night. Later that evening, after dinner, we were sitting on the couch listening to the fire crackle. That's when we heard it. The sound of an axe splitting wood, coming from somewhere outside, muffled by the fog. "Is that someone chopping wood?" Elena asked, sitting up straight. "At this hour?" It was past 11. The sound was rhythmic and steady, never faltering. Methodical, almost mechanical. We went to the window, but we couldn't see anything. The fog was an impenetrable wall of white. All we could do was listen. For the next hour, the chopping continued without pause. The most disturbing part was that it seemed to be getting closer. At first, it sounded distant, maybe a few hundred yards away. But slowly, steadily, the sound grew louder, clearer. As if whoever was out there was systematically working their way through the woods directly toward our lodge. Now it was right outside. I could almost feel the vibration through the floorboards. Elena got up and checked that the front and back doors were locked for the third time. Her earlier casual attitude had vanished. She looked just as frightened as I felt. We stood in the middle of the living room, frozen, listening to the relentless chopping just feet from our door. Then, as abruptly as it began, it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. We waited, listening for footsteps, for a doorknob turning, for anything. But there was nothing. We barely slept that night. The next morning, the fog persisted, though it had thinned slightly. I couldn't get the sound out of my head. I needed a rational explanation. I found Gregory's number and called him, pretending I had a question about the espresso machine. After he walked me through it, I tried to sound casual. "By the way, Gregory," I said, "it's incredibly peaceful out here. Do you have any neighbors close by?" His reply was cheerful and immediate. "Not at all. You've got the entire property to yourselves. The nearest occupied residence is about 6 miles down the mountain. Solitude is what I specialize in." My heart sank. No one at all? Maybe someone who cuts firewood. "Not for miles," he said confidently. "Why? Is something concerning you?" "Oh no," I lied, my voice tight. "It's just wonderfully quiet. Thanks again, Gregory." I hung up and looked at Elena. "He says no one lives within 6 miles. Elena's face went pale. "So, whoever was chopping wood last night." We both knew what that meant. The person who'd been chopping wood wasn't a neighbor. They were on our property, in the fog, right outside our door. And they had no legitimate reason to be there. We spent the next couple of days trying to act normal, but the spell was broken. The romantic getaway had transformed into a paranoid watch. Every creak of the lodge, every snap of a twig outside, sent a jolt of anxiety through me. We kept the doors locked at all times, even when we were inside. We told ourselves we were leaving in 2 days and just had to make it until then. On our last night, a storm rolled in. Rain hammered against the windows and wind howled through the trees. We went to bed early, exhausted from constant vigilance. Elena, worn out from being on high alert, fell asleep almost immediately. I couldn't. I lay there listening to the storm, my senses dialed up to maximum. Around 2 in the morning, I heard something over the sound of the rain. A soft metallic click from the front of the house. The front door. I froze, straining my ears. Then I heard it again. Unmistakably this time, the long, slow creak of a floorboard in the living room. Someone was inside the lodge. My body went rigid with terror. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Another creak. Closer this time. I finally found the strength to move and shook Elena violently. "Elena, wake up!" My voice trembling uncontrollably. "Someone's in the house." She came awake instantly, her eyes wide in the darkness. She didn't ask questions. She just listened. And then we both heard it. Another creak, right outside our bedroom door. Elena moved silently, reaching under her pillow. She pulled out the small handgun she always travels with. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would shatter. She put a finger to her lips, signaling for me to stay quiet, and crept out of bed. She moved to the bedroom door, her hand on the knob, the gun held ready in her other hand. She looked back at me, her face grim, and mouthed, "Stay here." Then, in one swift movement, she threw the door open and hit the hallway light switch, flooding the living room with bright, harsh light. And there he was, Gregory, our host. He was standing in the middle of the living room, his back to us. He was soaking wet from the rain. In his right hand, he held a large, gleaming kitchen knife. He turned around slowly. His face showed not panic or surprise, but mild annoyance, like we'd interrupted him doing a mundane task. Elena's voice was a low, steady command. "Don't move. Drop the knife. Now." She had the gun aimed squarely at Gregory's chest. Gregory's eyes flicked from the gun to Elena's face. He actually smiled slightly. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever witnessed. He held up his free hand in a placating gesture. "Whoa, easy now," he said, his voice calm and measured. "No need for that. I saw headlights out by the main road. Thought maybe someone was prowling around. I got worried, so I came up to check on you folks. The door was unlocked, so I let myself in." The story was pathetic, transparent. The door was unlocked because he'd unlocked it. Why would he bring a knife to check on headlights? Why wouldn't he knock? Why not call our phones? We weren't buying it, not for a second. "Get on the floor," Elena commanded, her voice shaking with adrenaline but leaving no room for argument. Gregory's smile faded. He slowly placed the knife on the floor. "Marcus, get the car keys," Elena said, her eyes never leaving our host. "We're leaving." I scrambled to find my jacket, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grab the keys from the pocket. Elena kept the gun trained on Gregory as we backed out of the bedroom, then through the living room and out the front door into the raging storm. We ran to the car, jumped in, and I locked the doors. Elena kept the gun visible as I peeled out of the gravel parking area, tires spitting rocks, and we sped down the mountain road through the torrential rain. As soon as we had a single bar of cell service, I called the police. They met us at a diner in the next town. We told them everything. The note, the chopping wood, the host standing in our living room with a knife. A deputy took our statement with a tired, skeptical expression. We followed up, of course. For weeks, we called the local sheriff's department. The answer was always the same. They'd questioned Gregory. He told them we'd overreacted. He claimed he was just a concerned property owner and that he had a master key for emergencies. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence of any crime. Without proof, it was just our word against his. They couldn't do anything. We never retrieved our belongings from the lodge. We didn't want them. We never heard from Gregory again. Sometimes I look up the lodge online just to see if it's still listed. It is? The reviews are still glowing. People still praise the thoughtful host who leaves them welcome baskets. I don't know what Gregory was planning to do that night, but I know it was him out there in the fog chopping wood. I know he was the one who studied my picture and left me those wildflowers. He was watching us the entire time, getting closer, testing boundaries, just waiting for the right moment to let himself in. We were lucky Elena woke up when she did. I hate to think what would have happened if we hadn't.